My name is Nathan. I'm 28 years old, and I'm the forgotten middle child who moved across the country without my parents even noticing. While they were busy attending every one of my brother Kyle's football games, I quietly built a tech company worth millions in California. 3 years of silence from them, until yesterday when my phone suddenly exploded with calls after my face appeared in Forbes. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I think you'll relate to what happened next. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I went from family afterthought to the one they couldn't stop calling. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, my life seemed picture perfect from the outside. Our 2-story colonial house with its manicured lawn sat in a neighborhood where success was expected, not celebrated. My father, Robert, built his reputation as one of the city's sharpest corporate attorneys, while my mother, Diana, sold luxury real estate to his colleagues. They provided us with everything we materially needed, but emotional support operated on a strict hierarchy in our household. At the top sat my older sister Elaine, 4 years my senior. With her perfect GPA, extracurricular accolades, and acceptance to Johns Hopkins Medical School, she set an impossible academic standard. Even now, at 32, her framed medical degree hangs prominently in our parents' living room, a constant reminder of the golden path I failed to follow. Then came me, the middle child, average in nearly every measurable way, according to my parents. I earned B's with occasional A's, played saxophone in band rather than a real sport, and spent most of my free time tinkering with computers in my room. Nothing exceptional, at least not in their eyes. At the bottom of the age hierarchy, but somehow at the top of my parents' priority list, was Kyle, my younger brother by 4 years. From the moment he showed athletic promise in elementary school, he became the family's shining star. His natural talent for football transformed our family's schedule, identity, and even our dinner conversations. The first time I truly recognized my place in the family hierarchy was when I turned 13. I had qualified for a regional coding competition that fell on the same day as one of Kyle's regular season football games. He was only 9 at the time, but there was never any question about which event my parents would attend. "We'll try to make it to your computer thing if Kyle's game finishes early," Mom said while adjusting my brother's uniform in the doorway. "Mrs. Abernathy said she'll drive you. Good luck with your video games." They never showed. I won second place and received my first programming award with only my friend's mother there to witness it. When I brought the trophy home, my father glanced up from reviewing Kyle's game footage and said, "That's nice, son," before immediately returning to analyzing my brother's performance. The pattern continued throughout my teenage years. By 16, I had accepted my role as the family afterthought. On my 16th birthday, my parents arrived 2 hours late to the small gathering I had planned with a few friends at the local pizza place. Kyle's private quarterback coaching session ran long, and of course they couldn't miss a minute of his development. "Sorry we're late," Nate, Dad, said, not looking particularly sorry as he checked his watch. "Kyle really nailed his spiral today. Coach Thompson thinks he might be starting varsity as a freshman next year." Despite the constant oversight, I found refuge in technology. Computers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. They responded based on the effort and intelligence you put into them, not based on some predetermined hierarchy of value. By 17, I had built my first professional website for Mr. Gallo's Italian restaurant down the street. He paid me $500, which felt like a fortune. When I showed my parents the check and the website I had created, my mother nodded absently while sorting through Kyle's athletic recruiting letters that had started arriving, even though he was only a high school freshman. "That's a nice hobby, Nathan," she said, "but you should really focus more on getting your math grade up if you want to get into a decent college." Our family photos told the story better than words ever could. The living room walls featured an entire chronicle of Kyle's athletic achievements, from his first T-ball participation trophy to action shots of him throwing perfect spirals. Elaine's academic honors had their own shrine in the hallway, her graduation photos and science fair ribbons meticulously arranged. My contributions to the family narrative were relegated to annual school photos and the occasional group picture where I stood awkwardly in the background. The most painful memory came during my high school graduation. I had actually graduated with honors, surprising even myself with a final GPA that put me in the top 15% of my class. As we gathered outside after the ceremony, my phone buzzed with a text. My father had received word that a scout from Michigan State had attended Kyle's spring football game and was expressing serious interest in recruiting him despite him being only a sophomore. What should have been my moment instantly evaporated. The celebratory dinner that night transformed into a strategy session about Kyle's collegiate sports prospects. My father ordered champagne not for my graduation but to toast Kyle's bright future. I sat silently watching my achievement dissolve into irrelevance. Michigan State has a decent computer program too. I think my mother offered at one point her attempt at including me in the celebration falling painfully flat. Maybe you could go there too and help your brother adjust. I nodded and smiled while something hardened inside me. I didn't want to be an accessory to someone else's story anymore. I wanted my own. The college application process revealed my parents' priorities with painful clarity. For Elaine, they had hired a private college counselor, arranged campus visits to 7 elite universities, and celebrated her acceptance to Johns Hopkins with a lavish party. For Kyle, they were already setting up meetings with athletic recruiters, despite him being only a sophomore in high school. For me, they handed over a stack of state school brochures and said, "Pick one that has good enough computer classes but won't break the bank." I chose Northern Illinois University, not because it was my dream school, but because it offered a solid computer science program and enough financial aid that I wouldn't need to rely heavily on my parents. When the acceptance letter arrived, my mother patted my shoulder and said, "Well, that's settled then," before returning to planning Kyle's summer football camp schedule. Move-in day at college became yet another study in family priorities. My parents dropped me off with minimal ceremony, helping unload my few boxes before checking their watches. "We need to get back," my father explained. "Kyle has a scrimmage this evening, and we promised we'd help set up the team dinner afterward." I stood alone in my bare dorm room after they left, feeling both abandoned and strangely liberated. This clean slate, this absence of constant comparison might be exactly what I needed. My roommate Marcus arrived an hour later, a lanky communications major from Detroit with an easy laugh and genuine curiosity about people. Unlike my family, when I mentioned my interest in programming, he didn't change the subject. "That's sick, man. My cousin works for Google and says programmers basically run the world now. What kind of stuff do you build?" That simple question, asked with actual interest, felt revolutionary. Throughout that first semester, Marcus became the first person who seemed to value what I could do. When I created a simple app to help us organize our class schedules and assignments, he treated it like I'd performed magic. "Dude, you made this. This is better than that expensive planner app I bought last year. You should sell this." His encouragement sparked something in me. I began developing small applications and websites, building a portfolio of work while maintaining decent grades. By sophomore year, I had secured a part-time job, maintaining the computer science department's website, which helped cover expenses my meager parental allowance didn't essentially. My family's disinterest continued to be both wound and weapon. During my second year, I received an award from the computer science department for an innovative project that streamlined the university's tutoring system. The ceremony fell on a Friday evening, and despite giving my parents 3 weeks' notice, they called the night before to cancel. "Kyle's team made the state semifinals," my mother explained, sounding genuinely puzzled that there might be a conflict. "It's the biggest game of his life, Nathan. You understand." I did understand with perfect clarity. I attended the ceremony alone, accepted my award with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and added another brick to the wall I was building between myself and my family. Family gatherings became exercises in invisibility. During Thanksgiving break junior year, I sat at the dining table, listening to my father analyze Kyle's latest game play-by-play, while my mother interjected with updates about Elaine's medical school rotations. 20 minutes passed before anyone directed a question my way. "So Nathan," my aunt finally asked, "are you still doing that computer thing?" Before I could answer, my father jumped in with news that Kyle had just been offered a scholarship to visit Michigan State's training facilities. The conversation swirled away from me again, and I retreated to the familiar role of audience member in the family drama. The most significant relationship I developed during college wasn't romantic but mentorial. Dr. Rivera, my advanced programming professor, recognized something in me that my family never had. "You have a mind for elegant solutions, Nathan," he told me after reviewing my midterm project. "You don't just solve problems, you find the simplest path through complex systems. That's rare." Under his guidance, I began exploring more ambitious projects, even co-authoring a research paper with him during my junior year. When I showed the published paper to my parents during winter break, my father glanced at it briefly. "Looks complicated," he said before turning to Kyle. "Show Nathan that trick play you guys ran last week." By senior year, I had secured an internship at a promising tech startup in Chicago. The experience confirmed what Dr. Rivera had been telling me: I had genuine talent for this work. The startup's founder offered me a full-time position after graduation, but during my final weeks as an intern, I overheard him discussing opening a new office in San Francisco. At my graduation ceremony, history repeated itself with cruel precision. My parents arrived late, having come directly from Kyle's spring training session. They sat through the proceedings, checking their phones for updates about some important recruiting visit happening the following day. When my name was called, I heard a distracted smattering of applause from their direction. The final blow came at the post-graduation lunch. We had barely ordered when my father checked his watch. "We need to wrap this up in 40 minutes, he announced. "Kyle's got a meeting with the Northwestern coaching staff this afternoon." I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and realized a fundamental truth: they weren't going to change. In their story, I would always be a supporting character at best. If I wanted to be the protagonist of my own life, I needed to write myself into a different narrative entirely. When the startup founder mentioned the San Francisco office again during my final week, I approached him after the meeting. "I'd like to be considered for the West Coast team," I said, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." 2 months after graduation, I received the official offer to join the San Francisco office of Vertex Solutions. The salary wasn't extraordinary, but it included relocation assistance and the promise of equity in a growing company. I accepted immediately, feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration at the prospect of moving 3,000 miles from everything familiar. I announced my decision during a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, choosing a moment when the conversation hit a rare lull. "I got a job offer in San Francisco," I said, trying to infuse my voice with the excitement I felt. "I'll be moving in 3 weeks." My mother paused briefly while serving Kyle an extra portion of roast beef. "San Francisco? That's far. When would you visit?" Before I could answer, my father's phone rang with a call from Kyle's strength coach. He stepped away from the table, completely engaged in a discussion about protein supplements and training regimens. My mother's attention drifted back to Kyle, asking about his summer conditioning schedule. My news hung in the air, acknowledged but unimportant. Neither asked about the job itself, the company, or my plans for the move. By dessert, it was as if I hadn't spoken at all. The following weeks passed in a blur of logistics and preparations. Marcus drove up from Detroit to help me pack along with 2 friends from the computer science department. My family was conspicuously absent from the packing process, each member wrapped up in their own priorities. "Your dad and I are taking Kyle to visit summer training camps this weekend," my mother explained when I mentioned needing help loading the moving truck. "Maybe ask one of your friends." The night before my departure, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, now stripped of posters and belongings. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, for some acknowledgement of the significance of my leaving, some indication that my absence would be felt. None came. The next morning, I loaded the last of my possessions into my car. My mother rushed past on her way to a showing, calling out, "Drive safe, honey. Text when you get there," before disappearing into her SUV. My father and Kyle had already left for an early morning training session. Standing in the driveway of the house where I had grown up, I felt strangely weightless. The tether of family expectation that had always held me in place, always a little too tight, had been severed not by me but by their indifference. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. The cross-country drive gave me time to process the reality of my situation. By the time I reached Colorado, I had stopped checking my phone for messages from my parents. By Utah, I had stopped expecting them to call. By Nevada, I had stopped caring if they did. San Francisco greeted me with fog and possibility. My new apartment was actually a room in a shared house in the Sunset District, small but affordable with the salary Vertex was offering. I spent that first night on an air mattress listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city, feeling terrified and more alive than I had in years. The adjustment period was brutal. The pace of work at the San Francisco office made the Chicago branch seem leisurely by comparison. The cost of living shocked me despite my research. The city itself was a maze of microclimates and unwritten social rules that I blundered through daily. But slowly I began to find my footing. Two coworkers, Alex and Jasmine, took me under their wing, inviting me to lunch and then to weekend outings. Alex was a brilliant back-end developer from Seattle, with a dry wit and encyclopedic knowledge of obscure bands. Jasmine designed user interfaces with an artist's eye and a psychologist's understanding of human behavior. Both treated my ideas with a respect I found almost disorienting after years of familial dismissal. Marcus checked in regularly, our friendship easily surviving the distance. "How's life as a California tech bro?" he would joke before asking thoughtful questions about my work and new social circle. His familiar voice became an anchor as I built a new life. 1 month after my arrival, I realized something startling. My parents hadn't called once to check how I was doing. I had sent a brief text upon arrival as promised, receiving only a thumbs-up emoji in response. The silence that followed was complete. I made 2 attempts to bridge the gap, calling on consecutive Sunday evenings when I knew the family would be home. Both conversations followed the same pattern, beginning with brief distracted greetings, before immediately pivoting to updates about Kyle's training progress and recruitment prospects. "Michigan State is really courting him now," my father said proudly during our second call. "Their quarterback coach is personally mentoring him." Neither parent asked about my job, my apartment, or my adjustment to a new city. When I attempted to share news about a project I was leading, my mother interrupted with, "Oh, that reminds me, Kyle's been interviewed for the local sports channel. We'll send you the link." The link never came. My final attempt at connection came 3 months after moving. I had developed a tool that streamlined our company's project management system, earning recognition from the CEO. I sent my parents a brief email explaining the achievement and included a link to a company blog post featuring my work. No response came. Not the next day, not the next week, not ever. That night I made a decision that felt both painful and necessary. I would stop initiating contact. The constant effort to matter to my own family was draining energy I needed for building my new life. I wouldn't cut them off, but I would no longer chase their attention. With that resolution came an unexpected sense of freedom. All the mental space I had devoted to seeking parental approval was suddenly available for other purposes. I threw myself into work with renewed focus, started exploring my new city with genuine curiosity, and began to build relationships based on mutual interest rather than obligation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in anyone's shadow. I was simply living. My liberation from family expectations coincided with a period of intense professional growth. 6 months after joining Vertex Solutions, I was promoted to lead developer on our main product, a surprising vote of confidence that came with both increased responsibility and a welcome salary bump. The promotion allowed me to move from my shared house to a small studio apartment in the Mission District. Though barely 500 square feet, having a space that was entirely mine felt luxurious after years of fitting myself into the margins of others' lives. It was at a company happy hour celebrating my promotion that I met Sophia. She had recently joined Vertex as a UX designer, bringing an artistic sensibility to our technically minded team. With her dark curly hair, quick laugh, and zero tolerance for technical jargon, she was unlike anyone I had dated before. "Explain what you do again," she challenged during our first conversation, "but pretend I'm an actual human being, not a computer." Her directness was refreshing after years of being overlooked. When I spoke, she listened with genuine interest. When she disagreed with me, she did so thoughtfully rather than dismissively. Our relationship developed with a natural ease that made me realize how much energy I had previously spent trying to matter to people who couldn't see me. Around this same time, my coworker Alex approached me with an idea that would change everything. We were walking back from lunch when he said, "The project management tool you built for internal use, it's better than anything on the market right now. We should develop it as a standalone product. The suggestion seemed absurd at first. I had created the tool to solve specific problems within our company, not as a commercial product. But Alex persisted, outlining a vision where we could address a significant gap in the market for mid-sized companies that needed robust project management without enterprise complexity. "We could do this ourselves," he said one evening as we sketched possibilities on napkins at a local bar. "Start something from scratch." The idea took root in my imagination. For weeks, Alex and I met after work hours, refining the concept, identifying our target market, and mapping out development needs. The more we discussed it, the more viable it seemed. 3 months later, we made the leap. I withdrew my modest savings, Alex convinced his parents to loan him startup capital, and we both resigned from Vertex to found Clarity Systems, operating initially from my tiny apartment. The first year was brutally difficult. We worked 18-hour days, surviving on ramen and coffee, our social lives evaporating under the pressure of building something from nothing. Sophia supported my decision but struggled with the reality of dating someone who was essentially married to a startup. We fought, made up, then fought again in a cycle that tested both our patience and commitment. Our finances stretched dangerously thin as we refined the product. I sold my car, moved to an even smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, and took on freelance coding jobs at night to keep us afloat. The stress manifested physically in weight loss, insomnia, and a constant low-grade anxiety that became my normal state of being. Just as our runway was about to expire, we caught our first break. A small venture capitalist attending a local tech meetup saw our demonstration and expressed interest. The initial investment was modest by Silicon Valley standards, but it allowed us to rent proper office space, hire 3 employees, and finally pay ourselves a subsistence salary. With proper resources, development accelerated. We launched our beta product to a small group of test companies, iterating rapidly based on their feedback. The response was cautiously positive, with users particularly praising the intuitive interface Sophia had designed after joining as our 3rd team member. The product officially launched 1 year and 2 months after we founded the company. Sales started slowly but steadily, each new client bringing validation and much-needed revenue. By our 2nd year, we had expanded to a team of 15, moved to larger offices, and reached profitability, a rare achievement for such a young startup. Throughout this period of intense growth and change, the silence from my family remained absolute. I sent Christmas cards with brief updates about my life and received nothing in return. I emailed occasional photos of San Francisco with no response. I even sent a company-branded sweatshirt to Kyle when he finally committed to Michigan State, but never heard if he received it. The 2-year anniversary of my move to California arrived with no acknowledgement from my parents. That evening, Sophia and I walked along the Embarcadero, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever think about calling them?" she asked, her hand warm in mine. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but then I remember that the phone works both ways." She nodded, understanding the weight of unsaid words. "You know it's okay to grieve the relationship you wished you had with them." Her gentle permission broke something loose inside me. Standing there with the woman who truly saw me, I allowed myself to feel the full measure of what I had lost, or perhaps had never really had. The following week, at Sophia's encouragement, I began seeing Dr. Miller, a therapist, specializing in family estrangement. Our sessions were painful but clarifying as I unpacked decades of seeking validation from people fundamentally unable to provide it. "You've built an impressive life," Dr. Miller observed during one session. "Not to spite them, which would still be giving them power over you, but because it's the life you wanted. That's a significant achievement." As Clarity Systems continued to grow, we began attracting attention from larger players in the industry. A competitor approached us with an acquisition offer that would have set us up comfortably, but the figure felt premature given our trajectory. "We're just getting started," Alex said when we discussed the offer over beer at our regular spot. "This could be much bigger if we hold on longer." I agreed, feeling for perhaps the first time that I deserved the success we were building. The middle child, accustomed to settling for less, was learning to reach for more. Everything changed on an ordinary Tuesday in October, 3 years after I had left Chicago. I was reviewing quarterly projections with our finance team when Sophia burst into the conference room, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she said, sliding the device across the table. The screen displayed an article from TechCrunch titled, "Startups to Watch How Clarity Systems is Disrupting Project Management." My photo appeared prominently alongside Alex's, both of us looking more serious than I remembered from the photo shoot. "We're going viral in the industry," Sophia explained, barely containing her excitement. "3 other publications have picked up the story, and Tech Founder wants an exclusive interview." The article praised our innovative approach and referenced our rapidly growing client base, now including several Fortune 500 companies. Industry analysts quoted in the piece predicted our valuation would triple within 18 months. The publicity triggered a cascade effect. Our user base expanded exponentially as word spread. Our sales team struggled to keep up with demo requests. Venture capitalists who had previously ignored us suddenly found our number, eager to discuss expansion capital. Most significantly, a tech giant whose project management tools we had disrupted reached out through back channels to discuss potential synergies. The euphemism fooled no one. They were testing the waters for acquisition. Initial discussions evolved into serious negotiations over the course of 3 intense months. Their first offer was substantial but clearly undervalued our potential. We countered, they adjusted, and the dance continued until we arrived at a figure that seemed impossible: $68 million, with retention packages for key team members. The night before signing the final papers, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, now a spacious 2-bedroom with views of the city, trying to process the imminent transformation of my life. The middle child, who had never been exceptional, was about to become wealthy beyond his wildest expectations. The signing ceremony itself felt surreal. Surrounded by lawyers, executives, and my core team, I watched as years of work culminated in a simple signature. My portion after taxes and investor payouts would be $22 million, with additional performance bonuses possible over the next 3 years. That evening, we held a celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the bay. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table as Alex raised a toast to our journey from my tiny apartment to this moment. The team that had believed in us shared stories, laughed, and planned futures now rich with possibility. I felt a contentment that had nothing to do with the money and everything to do with building something valuable with people who valued me. The news broke publicly the following morning. TechCrunch ran the acquisition story, followed quickly by the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. By afternoon, my phone began buzzing with notifications from social media accounts I rarely checked. Former classmates, distant relatives, and long-forgotten acquaintances all suddenly remembered my existence. Among the flood of messages, one name stopped my heart: Diana Bennett, my mother. The call came at 6:42 p.m., just as Sophia and I were discussing dinner plans. I stared at the screen for several rings, my stomach tightening with a familiar anxiety I thought I had outgrown. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Sophia asked. I nodded and pressed accept, putting the phone to my ear. "Hello." "Nathan." My mother's voice sounded exactly the same, warm and slightly distracted. "I've been trying to reach you all day. Your father and I just saw the news about your company. Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well?" The casual tone, as if we had spoken last week instead of 3 years ago, left me momentarily speechless. She continued without noticing my silence. "We always knew you were smart with computers, but this is extraordinary. Your father's golf partner Bill works in venture capital, and he was just raving about some project management software that turns out to be yours. Can you believe it?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom, when was the last time we spoke?" A brief pause. "Oh, it hasn't been that long, has it? We've all been so busy. Kyle's been starting as quarterback this season, you know. His coach thinks he could go pro eventually." The conversation continued in this surreal vein, my mother chatting as if bridging a gap of weeks rather than years. She didn't acknowledge my move across the country, the complete lack of communication, or the fact that she was only calling now that my success had become public. As we spoke, I remembered the change of address cards I had sent when I first moved, the holiday greetings that received no response, the email updates that disappeared into silence. I thought of birthdays and Christmases that passed without so much as a text. The next day brought a call from my father, his tone gruffly proud, in a way I had only ever heard him use about Kyle. "Your mother tells me you've done quite well for yourself," he said by way of greeting. "Always knew you had a good head for business." He had never said any such thing. In fact, he had once suggested I consider accounting rather than programming, because at least accountants have job security. What followed was a bizarre rewriting of history, in which my father had apparently always believed in my potential and supported my move to California. "Taking risks is how you get ahead," he declared, as if he hadn't spent my entire childhood promoting the safety of traditional career paths for everyone except Kyle. The most revealing call came 3 days later from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who lived in Detroit. "Nathan, sweetie, your mother just shared the wonderful news. We're all so proud." "Thanks, Aunt Patricia," I replied, genuinely fond of her, despite our limited contact over the years. "How have you been?" "Oh, fine, fine. Listen, I have to tell you something." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your parents have been showing everyone that article about you. Your father brought printouts to his golf club. It's all they've talked about at family gatherings lately." I frowned. "Family gatherings?" "Oh." A pause. "I assumed they'd invited you. We've had Easter at their place, 4th of July at your Uncle Steve's, Thanksgiving back at your parents' last year." The revelation that family events had continued without me, that I had been so thoroughly erased from the family narrative, only to be hastily written back in when it became advantageous, struck deeper than I expected. The most predictable call came from Kyle, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Bro, you're like a secret millionaire now." His enthusiasm seemed genuine enough. "That's insane. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I tried," I said simply. No one was listening. A beat of uncomfortable silence followed before Kyle pivoted to the real purpose of his call. He had developed a training app concept for college athletes and needed startup capital. He thought $20,000 would be enough to get it off the ground, and who better to invest than his suddenly wealthy brother? The final straw came a week after the acquisition announcement. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon, her voice bright with excitement. "We've booked flights to San Francisco for next weekend. Your father has always wanted to see the city, and now we'll get to see your life there too. We assumed we'd stay with you, of course. You must have plenty of room now that you're successful." No discussion, no invitation, not even a question of whether I was available or willing to host them. Just the same old assumption that their priorities automatically superseded mine, with the new twist that my resources were now considered family resources. Something settled into place inside me, a certainty that had been building for years. "Actually, Mom, that doesn't work for me. I'm happy to recommend some nice hotels, though." The week before my parents' visit, I spent 2 emergency sessions with Dr. Miller, developing strategies for maintaining boundaries, while still allowing for the possibility of reconciliation. "Remember, you're not responsible for their feelings about your boundaries," she emphasized. "You're only responsible for communicating those boundaries clearly and respectfully." Sophia was supportive, but concerned. "Are you sure you want to see them at all? You don't owe them your time." "I need to do this," I explained. "Not for them, but for me. I need to say things I've never said, and I need to say them face to face." We agreed on a plan. I would pick them up from the airport, take them to dinner at a nice but neutral restaurant, and be clear about my expectations for our relationship moving forward. Sophia would join us for dinner, both as support for me and to observe the family dynamics I had described. My parents arrived on Friday afternoon, emerging from the terminal looking older than I remembered. My mother's hair had more gray, my father's posture slightly stooped. They spotted me and waved enthusiastically, as if greeting a long-lost son, which I supposed I was, though not in the way they seemed to imagine. Their surprise at my appearance in a Tesla was poorly concealed. "My goodness, Nathan, is this yours?" my mother asked, running her hand along the sleek exterior. "Company car," I explained, helping them load their luggage, "part of the acquisition package." "Smart," my father nodded approvingly. "Bet it's a tax write-off too." The drive to their hotel was filled with one-sided conversation, my parents commenting on the city views, while peppering me with questions about my sudden success. Neither acknowledged the 3-year gap in our relationship, or showed any curiosity about my life beyond its financial aspects. I dropped them at the hotel to rest and change before dinner, using the break to center myself for the evening ahead. Sophia met me at our apartment, her presence a calming anchor. "Remember who you are now," she said, straightening my collar, "not who they made you feel you were." The restaurant I had chosen offered excellent food and private corner tables, perfect for difficult conversations. My parents arrived 20 minutes late, already discussing Kyle's latest game as they approached our table. "He threw for 300 yards," my father was saying before transitioning smoothly into introductions. "You must be Sophia. Nathan's told us so much about you." I hadn't told them anything about her, of course having had no communication with them until the previous week. Sophia's raised eyebrow acknowledged the fiction, but she shook their hands graciously. The first half-hour of dinner followed a surreal script where my parents pretended we had an ongoing relationship while simultaneously revealing their complete ignorance of my life. They asked Sophia how long we had been dating clearly, having no idea that we had been together for nearly 2 years. They expressed surprise that I had lived in San Francisco so long, though they couldn't say exactly when I had moved. My mother pulled out her phone during the appetizer course. "Look at these pictures from Kyle's homecoming game last month," she said, swiping through dozens of action shots. The scouts from the Bears were there watching him specifically. My father leaned toward Sophia conspiratorially. "His brother's going to be in the NFL, mark my words. Athletic talent like that doesn't come along often." I watched them fall into their familiar pattern, centering the conversation on Kyle, while treating me and now Sophia as audience members rather than participants. The behavior was so ingrained, they didn't even seem aware of doing it. As the main course arrived, my father finally turned the conversation to business, but with a telling angle. "So Nathan, your mother and I have been thinking about family investments now that you've had this windfall. Kyle has some excellent opportunities that could use capital, and your sister Elaine is looking at opening her own practice." My mother nodded eagerly. "Family should support family. Your father and I supported all 3 of you through college, and now it's time for everyone to help each other succeed." I set down my fork carefully. The moment had arrived sooner than I expected, but perhaps that was for the best. "When was the last time we spoke before last week?" I asked quietly. My parents exchanged glances. "Well, we've all been busy," my mother offered vaguely. 3 years, I said. "I moved across the country 3 years ago, and you didn't call once to see how I was doing. I sent holiday cards, emails, updates about my life. Nothing came back." My father frowned. "Now that's not entirely fair. We've always respected your independence. You were always the self-sufficient one, not needing us hovering like Kyle does with his athletics." "It wasn't independence," I corrected him. "It was invisibility. I wasn't allowed to need attention because that resource was already allocated elsewhere." My mother's expression hardened. "That's a very selfish perspective, Nathan. We gave you everything you needed growing up. Material needs, yes, but I was a ghost in our family. My achievements were footnotes, my interests were hobbies, my existence was peripheral. Do you know what it feels like to realize your parents didn't notice you moved to another state?" My father's face flushed. "We noticed. We were giving you space to establish yourself. Really, what's my address? What company did I work for before starting Clarity? Who are my friends here? What's my favorite spot in the city I let?" The questions hang in the air, met with telling silence. Sophia reached for my hand under the table as I continued. "I built a life here because I had to. I stopped trying to matter to you because it was exhausting and futile. And now that I've found success on my own terms, you suddenly remember I exist. We've always been proud of you," my mother insisted, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "You've always been proud of Kyle," I corrected. "You tolerated me and occasionally remembered to check if I was still alive. Those aren't the same thing." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder of photos I had prepared my college graduation with them, checking their phones in the background. My 16th birthday with them arriving late and distracted. Countless family photos where I stood awkwardly at the margin while Kyle occupied the center. "This was my reality growing up," I said, sliding the phone toward them. "And these are the events you missed or ignored." I scrolled to show them my apartment building when I first moved to San Francisco, my first office space, our company celebration, after securing initial funding Sophia and me on our one-year anniversary. A visual chronicle of the life they had shown no interest in until it came with a price tag they found impressive. My mother's face crumpled slightly. "We didn't realize you felt this way." "You never asked," I replied simply. My father predictably moved to the defensive. "We did the best we could with 3 kids, all going in different directions. The fact that you've done so well proves we must have done something right." I succeeded despite the dynamic in our family, not because of it. Dr. Miller helped me understand that. "You're seeing a therapist." My mother looked genuinely shocked. "What do you need therapy for when everything's going so well?" Before I could answer, my father's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then at my mother, a silent communication passing between them. "It's Kyle," he said already, moving to accept the call. He just finished his game. And there it was, the perfect demonstration of everything I had been trying to explain. My father turned away from the table, instantly absorbed in Kyle's recap of his performance, while my mother leaned toward him to catch both sides of the conversation. I looked at Sophia, who squeezed my hand in silent support. "This," I said when my father finally ended the call, "this right here is what I'm talking about." Even now, in the middle of arguably the most important conversation we've ever had as a family, Kyle calls, and everything else stops. My father had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, though he quickly rallied. He had a big game tonight. Michigan State is playing for the division title. And I'm sitting right in front of you, after not seeing you for 3 years, trying to have an honest conversation about our relationship, I countered. "But that's never been the priority, has it?" My mother's expression hardened again. "I think you're being very unfair. We came all this way to see you." "You came when you found out I had money," I corrected her. "Let's be honest about that, at least." The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother grew tearful, claiming I was punishing them for supporting Kyle's dream. My father became increasingly defensive, suggesting my success had made me arrogant and ungrateful. When I declined to commit to investing in Kyle's app idea, they both looked at me as if I had betrayed some fundamental family contract. "Family supports family." My father repeated his tone, making clear that he only recognized the obligation as flowing in one direction toward Kyle. "I agree," I said calmly. "Which is why I'm willing to try building a real relationship with you both if you're interested in knowing who I actually am rather than who you assumed I was. But that relationship will have healthy boundaries, including financial ones." They left shortly after, my mother sniffling dramatically, while my father settled the bill with visible reluctance now that funding Kyle's venture was off the table. As they departed, I felt a curious lightness, as if speaking my truth had physically unburdened me. Sophia watched them go, then turned to me with a gentle smile. "I'm so proud of you." In that moment, her genuine pride meant more than my parents' approval ever had. The week following our confrontational dinner brought a barrage of texts and calls from my parents. My mother alternated between guilt trips, "After all we've sacrificed for you," and attempts to minimize our conversation. Every family has its ups and downs. My father took a more direct approach, suggesting that my attitude was the real problem and that I needed to get over myself and remember where I came from. I responded to each message with the same calm statement: "I'm open to building a healthier relationship, but only with professional support through family counseling." Their initial reaction was predictably dismissive. My mother claimed we didn't need strangers interfering in family business, while my father declared therapy a waste of time and money. I held firm, neither arguing nor giving ground. "This is my boundary. I respect that you may not be interested in meeting it, and that's your choice to make." After 10 days of resistance, my mother finally called with a reluctant concession. "Your father and I have discussed it, and if this is what it takes for you to be reasonable about family obligations, we'll try one session with a counselor." I arranged an appointment with a family therapist Dr. Miller had recommended, Dr. Abernathy, who specialized in adult family reconciliation. Our first session was as uncomfortable as I had anticipated, with my parents arriving armed with justifications and my own emotions running closer to the surface than I had expected. Dr. Abernathy skillfully guided the conversation away from accusations toward observations and feelings. When my father started listing all they had provided for me materially, she redirected. Nathan isn't questioning your financial support. He's describing an emotional experience of being overlooked. Can we explore that? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Midway through our second session, my brother Kyle joined by video call at my suggestion. I had reached out to him privately explaining my perspective and asking if he would participate. I know you guys always favored Kyle, he said bluntly to our parents, causing them both to stiffen in denial. I wasn't blind to it. I benefited from it. But it wasn't fair to Nathan, and honestly, it wasn't great for me either. The pressure was intense, and watching how you treated him made me feel guilty for getting so much attention. My parents sat in stunned silence as their golden child confirmed everything I had been trying to tell them. Kyle continued, his voice gaining confidence. Nathan was building amazing things with computers while I was throwing a ball. But you acted like my games were world events, while his accomplishments barely registered. He deserved better. And now that he's successful, despite that, you're suddenly interested. It's not right. My father attempted to interrupt, but Kyle pressed on. Dad, you spent more on my football equipment in one season than you did on Nathan's entire college tuition. Mom, you've got a shrine to my sports career in the den, but didn't even frame Nathan's college diploma. I noticed that stuff. Nathan noticed it too. The session ended with my mother in tears and my father uncharacteristically quiet. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but it was the first crack in the wall of denial they had built around their parenting. Over the following months, we continued meeting with Dr. Abernathy, sometimes in person when my parents visited San Francisco, sometimes virtually. Progress came in small, inconsistent increments. There were sessions of genuine insight, followed by relapses into old patterns. There were sincere apologies undermined by subsequent actions that showed old habits die hard. I maintained firm boundaries throughout the process. When my mother attempted to guilt me about missing a family gathering to attend a friend's wedding, I calmly restated my position. I make decisions based on my priorities and commitments, just as you've always done with Kyle's. Events. When my father brought up Kyle's business idea again, I explained my position clearly. I'm happy to review his business plan and offer feedback as someone with startup experience. But any investment would be evaluated on its merits, not family obligation. The most meaningful development came in my relationship with Kyle himself. Free from our parents' comparative framework, we began building a genuine connection as adults. He visited San Francisco during his off-season, and I showed him around the city, introduced him to Sophia and my friends, and shared parts of my life that had been invisible to my family. I never really knew you, he admitted one evening, as we watched the sunset from Dolores Park. I was so caught up in my own stuff, and Mom and Dad made everything about my football. I'm sorry I didn't try harder to be a better brother. We were both stuck in the roles they assigned us, I told him, but we get to define our relationship now. 6 months after our initial confrontation, we attempted a family dinner again, this time at my parents' hotel with Sophia joining us. The difference was subtle but significant. My mother still mentioned Kyle's football career, but she also asked Sophia thoughtful questions about her design work. My father referred to me as our tech genius once, which felt awkward but represented genuine effort on his part. The most telling moment came when Kyle called during dinner. Instead of immediately answering, my father sent the call to voicemail saying I'll call him back later. We're having family time now. The small gesture spoke volumes. As my personal life stabilized, I found myself thinking about the broader implications of my experience. The acquisition of clarity systems had left me with resources far beyond my needs and the freedom to choose my next path. After discussion with Sophia, who had experienced her own version of being overlooked as a creative child in a family that valued only academic achievement, we established the Visibility Foundation. The Foundation's mission was twofold: to provide scholarships for overlooked students with technical aptitude and to fund mentorship programs connecting these students with successful professionals in their fields of interest. We particularly focused on middle children, first-generation college students, and others who traditionally fell through the cracks of family and institutional support systems. I also began mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly those without strong family support networks. Having navigated the startup landscape without guidance, I could offer both technical advice and emotional perspective to those on similar journeys. Sophia and I deepened our personal commitment as well, getting engaged during a weekend trip to Big Sur. Our wedding plans included a small ceremony with close friends, my siblings, and yes, my parents, whose invitation came with clear expectations about respectful behavior. 3 years after my confrontation with my parents, our relationship remains a work in progress. There are still moments of frustration when old patterns emerge, still occasions when I need to reinforce boundaries. But there are also glimpses of the family connection. I had always craved a genuine compliment from my father about a foundation initiative, my mother asking Sophia for interior design advice, without mentioning Kyle once during the conversation. The most profound change, however, has been internal. I no longer measure my worth by their recognition or approval. The desperate need to matter to them has been replaced by the knowledge that I matter, full stop, whether they see it or not. I've built a life filled with people who value me for exactly who I am, not for how I compare to someone else. I've learned that family includes both those we're born to and those we choose. That visibility begins with seeing ourselves clearly, not through the distorted lens of others' perceptions. That the quiet middle child overlooked at the dinner table can build a life of meaning and connection on his own terms. I still carry the scars of growing up invisible, but they no longer define me. Instead, they've become part of a larger story about finding worth within myself, rather than seeking it from those unable to provide it. About building a life where I am valued, not merely tolerated. Have you ever had to create healthy boundaries with family members who couldn't see your true worth until something changed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal growth. Remember, sometimes, the greatest success isn't measured by your bank account, but by your ability to stand in your truth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to be visible in your own life.